cut out halfway there. Strange. Oh, and we lost Jeremy. Maybe he'll be back. Not sure what happened. Always the glitches when we start. So, for tonight, I'm joined with the wonderful Mike from Faraday Research, Michael E. Boyd. Jeremiah joined the technicians, and Jeremy was just here, but don't know what happened. Hopefully, he'll be back. And Charlie C was supposed to be joining us. Not sure if Charlie is going to make it or not. Hopefully he pops in, but we'll be showing some of the work that they've been going on regardless. First off, I guess, Mr. Mike Faraday Research, I will let you take over and show a little bit of your atoms motor and the batteries you've been working on, and then I'll let Mr. Boyd talk about how he's replicating some of them.
Yeah, just basically just trying to perfect the atoms motor, and I developed a situation with the motor that Jim Murray and Paul Babcock have been working on for like 40 years to overcome. And it's called capacitive inductance of the coil. So basically the situation is all the power that gets drawn into the coil, the motor coil, is getting trapped, has no means of getting out. Some power does come out, but not to its fullest potential. So let's say about 6 months ago, I started dabbling with the piezoelectric transducers, and it created a new situation where it was able to overcome the capacitive inductance problem. And the video that's up on the screen right now is the video I did of the actual test on the scope. And yeah, you can check that video. I don't know, are you going to play that video, Bernie, or you can play a small portion
It's
of it?
unmuted, or I was playing it muted kind of next to you if you wanted to describe it, or
Put it
should
to the
I
spot.
unmute it?
Yeah, so basically what happens is I've got the mechanical switch that's actually used to trip the coil to actually make the coil run, to actually make the motor spin. Now the piezo transducers are on the other side of that coil, creating a reverberation of the frequency, which actually now boosts the frequency, from 60 hertz. Now it's running at about 127 hertz. So this difference in frequency is actually making the coil vibrate, and it's driving that the potential, the power that's being trapped by the capacitive inductance in the coil. It's now releasing it. So my last tests were showing about an 18-to-1 power ratio gain. Now, before I started using the transducers, I could barely get one bulb lit up. So, yeah, I wasn't able to light up anything. Just the power output was just so poor. And I'm going, there's something else going on here. I got to figure it out. So, yeah, so I just started experimenting. So I got the transducers, hooked it up to the circuit, and I started noticing a substantial amount of power gain without putting any extra power into the circuit. I was getting power gain. So I added 4 of them in series, and I have that set up on this model here that you can see on the screen. And I'm getting 18, sometimes 20-to-1 power gain. Like one test I did, I was only putting in about 0.9 watts, and I was powering up 18 watts of light bulbs. Where before, without the piezos, I could barely light up one. So it's showing that I'm overcoming the capacitive inductance in the coil. Now that power is actually getting out. So yeah, it's, you know what, you just have to experiment and try different things.
And
And
so you're
yeah,
saying now
so
you're getting about 19 times
18,
over 18
18.
times over Unity with everything you have hooked up in this system.
Yeah, so what also I'm finding out too, you get greater gains if you increase the input voltage. So instead of 12 volts, I've been playing with 18 volts up to 24 volts. At 24 volts, I can light up 40 watts of light bulbs, and I'm only putting in 1.2 watts of power. So yeah, I'm getting the validation from a couple other of my subscribers, and they're trying out what I'm doing, and they're saying, holy man, it's working. It's actually doing what it's doing. So you can see there, I'm only putting in 40 milliamps power with 24 volts. That's why, if I put a small capacitor bank like 16 volts at 500 farad, will run this motor for 4 hours. So it's extremely efficient, and it's putting out power now, where before I couldn't get hardly any power output at all.
That's a
So
step forward with that and the utilization of it.
yeah, so basically I'm doing the same thing that Jim Murray and Paul Babcock have been working on for the last 20 plus years in a way, way simpler method of doing it. And it was
What
all by accident. It was all by accident.
what's the wattage on the bulbs?
Bulbs, well, total, all 8 of them is 40 watts. So I
So
got
what are they?
4.
LEDs? Are they LED
Yeah,
bulbs?
they're household LEDs.
Gotcha.
They take 350 milliamps to run them at 120 volts. I got 4 5.5s, and I got 4 9 watts. Yeah, so I can light all that up with 1.2 watts of power input. So
I'm just wondering if you got an incandescent bulb, if it would still
it
work.
does work. Yeah, it still does work. Yep, I've had a couple of incandescent bulbs hooked up, and it does work.
How
Now
about
that
have you
the
tried
incandescent,
another inductive load? Another motor
well, I'm
run
not
on that?
really. See, the whole point of this motor is not really to run lights. Right now, I'm just using the lights basically as a ballast.
Oh, I
Because,
understand. I'm just saying, could you
yeah,
run a inductive load?
it's not really designed for that. It's designed for, pulse battery charging. So that battery that you're
Gotcha.
charging would run an inverter, and then the inverter would run your utilities. So this is a recharging apparatus.
Oh,
So
interesting.
this would pretty much replace the solar panel, because you put one motorcycle or 2 motorcycle batteries in parallel. You got 24 volts. If say they're 11 amp hours, the thing would run for probably about 4 or 5 days before those batteries would actually need to be charged, because a battery obviously has a lot more capacitance than a super cap, right?
So charging this battery, these batteries that these carbon batteries, are they carbon? What did you call them? Carbon air batteries?
Well, that's something totally different. I'm actually charging up lead acid batteries.
Oh,
So
okay, cool. That's
yeah, yeah.
I got
So what I do is I take a lead acid battery. What you have to do, a lot of people don't really understand this, because this charger is using negative energy. So to
you. Yeah,
charge it
could you
negative,
explain that a little more?
yeah,
For
negative energy just it operates under different conditions, where positive energy will always create a heat scenario. So like, say like your standard uh, charger that you would use to charge up a car battery, it's pumping a lot of amperage into that battery, and you're generating heat. It's also producing a lot of gas bubbles inside the battery. It involves a lot of heat. That's where hysteresis takes place. So the negative energy works exactly the opposite. It doesn't have any heat involved. You don't need to pump 5, 10, 12 amps into the battery to charge it. where negative energy, you're spiking it at a high voltage but low current. So you get it into a situation that you're able to pump this power into the battery with no heat. And heat on anything will destroy a battery eventually. Eventually the battery dies off. So what you have to do is when you get the battery, initially get the new battery, you got to discharge it completely to zero.
Okay.
And then you charge it with the negative energy into the battery. So you're going to remove the positive energy and replace it with the negative energy. Now, after you do this, now to recover and recharge the battery now takes a lot less time.
So how do you do it with negative? How do you put negative energy into the battery? So basically, you hook it up backwards?
Nope. You just hook it up to the Adams motor, because the Adams motor, the back EMF generated from this motor is negative energy. And
I see.
You'll see that on the
So it's like
waveform.
hysteresis, you're saying?
Well, hysteresis is positive energy.
Right.
Because there's heat involved. Negative energy.
Well, but if you switch directions, it goes the opposite way.
Hey,
right,
guys.
So,
can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
May I answer this question? I've had this conversation now. This will be the fourth time in the last, I want to say 48 hours.
Okay.
So here we go.
Cool.
Negative energy. Let's just call this cold electricity to follow the classical electrodynamics trend. How do we make cold electricity? As in electricity which, when it flows through a circuit or produces a power output, produces a temperature cooling effect on the coils, the conductors, all the parts. Okay. Bernie, I know you've heard of this because you know Sean, and even you, Michael Boyd, have been quite the expert in the fields. I know you've seen it too. It's called electrostatic cooling. What happens with electrons when they are flowing through a conductor? Well, they slam into a whole bunch of electron dipole moments around the valence shells of mother atoms, and then they have a free flow space between those valence shells in which they carry thermokinetic or Brownian motion energy from one atom to the next. They produce a friction, if you will, a heat as a result of their interactions and phase angle changes within a given material, and we end up getting a loss called resistance. Resistance is the differential between the angle of the electron moving directly collinear to the sidewalls of the wire, or having to travel at another angle that's not collinear, and as a result experiencing a differential voltage potential. So this is not a good thing. Negative energy has no resistance. In fact, it has negative resistance. Negative resistance, negative energy. So how do we generate it? Back to the original topic. This is how we do it. Electrons carry momentum. If we give a conductor, say a coil of wire, for example, an excess of electrons by total quantity, and then we simply allow the electrons to neutralize it against another conductor, or say a neutralizing source, where they can then flow and more evenly distribute and they're farther apart, we can think of this like pressure in a vessel. If you think about an air compressor or a refrigerator, as you compress the gases, you end up cramming more molecules, more matter into a smaller volume of space, and you get heat. If that heat radiates off, and then you decompress after the heat has radiated off, you end up getting a cooling temperature. This is what's happening with the electrons inside of a wire in cold electric circuits. You put them in slowly, fill the wire with a whole bunch of electrons, and after they have gone in slowly and radiated off their extra electromotive force, then you suddenly discharge them quickly and allow them to exit so that they spread out. Ultimately, the electrons are no longer quite as packed as they were, and as a result don't have as much pressure differential to each other. So you get a cooling effect since the electrons carry the thermokinetic energy or the Brownian motion with them. That's cold electricity in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. And in fact, in the what's called the National Electrical Code, they have this thing about when you got a bunch of wires, and wiring a house, you can't put them these bunches of wires too close together for a certain distance, or you have to derate them because of this, just what you're talking about. And one of the things that I always thought was kind of cool is the side where the power is coming in on the opposite side of where they're like pinched, the wires get condensation on it because they're cooler. And I never really thought about it until you just brought that up.
I know it's been right in front of us the whole time, and it's really funny how we've kind of missed it and ignored it, even though we've all somewhat seen this. And it was actually, I was 12 years old, and I was playing around with a neon sign transformer and 4 rectifier diodes, each pulled out of a microwave oven. And after rectifying the output of this neon sign transformer, it was a 7.5 kV single-sided on this particular case, because it was a 15 kV transformer. One side was burned out, so I just used single side, one of the two that wasn't burned out against the ground. 7.5 kV AC, and our peak-to-peak is higher. So we're still good for the 12 kV diodes. Long story short, I got a DC output rectified and very, unfiltered 120 hertz pulse DC. And I smoothed that with a capacitor and put it to 2 electrodes that were arcing to each other. I noticed that my positive electrode, made of a bolt, and another bolt of the exact same size, each of them 1/4 inch, smoothed ends and polished, rounded off. These 2 bolts were different temperatures. In fact, one of the 2 bolts, the positively charged bolt, was melting, and the negatively charged bolt on that side of the rectifier, it was actually colder than room temperature by about maybe, I want to say, 9 to 10 degrees.
Wow.
So I found this particularly strange that I could actually melt one bolt, but the other one wouldn't even get warm. In fact, it was colder than room temp. And it totally blew my mind at the time. Of course, I was, like I said, 12 years old. Now I'm over 36.
Well, maybe that's why you became the person you are.
It's part of the story. But long story short, it's electrostatic cooling. The electrons took the momentum from the Brownian motion out of the cathode, the negatively charged bolt, and they transferred it through the plasma arc, the anode, the positively charged bolt. As a result, we got a temperature differential of over 2,000 degrees.
Wow.
It's quite amazing, but yet it's so simple. And all we have to realize is one fundamental principle. Electrons can carry physical Brownian motion and momentum with them as they leave a conductor through a plasma arc and into another target object.
So I wonder if it affects the weight.
I've also always wondered that and haven't properly set it up because unfortunately the magnetic fields and the electric fields affect scale measurements, so the actual measuring is rather difficult.
And you're saying this is applicable on DC electricity, right? It's not necessarily on AC?
It happens with AC, but it switches back and forth, and you end up getting the net momentum gain from the electrical power loss of the resistance for the wire. But with DC, you don't. You separate the two.
Usable, it's a potential to be used with DC, where AC, it destroys that energy potential switching back and forth.
Yes, if you understand the difference between these two, you have to destroy it on one side of a flying craft, for example, and create it on the other. So you have a flow on the top side, for example, and you destroy that flow by distributing it with an AC field on the bottom side of that craft.
So what's going on here in the video?
So yeah, this was another channel that I wanted you guys to take a look at. Jeremiah, you saw a little bit of his videos on the last one, but this he's connecting, I believe, this aluminum sail to a grounding, or the ground is something else, and this sail is next to the Tesla coil. But he seems to be getting a lot of over unity on it, and that it's built off the principles. I'll play it again with sound later. It was the Don
I can comment
Smith.
already, though. This is Omega ZZ. The guy is great. In fact, myself and 3 other people kind of got together all simultaneously, watched these videos, and then YouTube algorithms looked at all of us in this tiny, tiny little community of 170 or so of us and started suggesting Omega ZZ's channel to a lot of other people, which is exactly why I have been receiving message after message from other people in our community to watch his videos. even though we kind of started that whole let's share this with everybody and do it through the YouTube algo as an experiment thing. So that worked. Turns out you can use YouTube algos to distribute this to your tiny little community if it's small enough and you know who all the names are and what they watch. But yeah, it's kind of amazing.
And I noticed that he has the big ball on top of the Tesla coils there, and that helps as an antenna, I think, in making.
I'm sorry, not Omega Z, energy researcher.
Energy research.
They got the channel names mixed up.
So what's the ball? That's part of that's where the positive ions are being
quick
created.
One here and play it with the sound.
Yeah, I think it's a Slayer circuit.
Bulb is being run from earth ground and literally just an antenna. So the antenna and earth ground go to a rectifier, and it runs this extremely bright bulb, which is giving off a lot of heat, by the way, like more heat than it should. So the next step is to get other earth grounds and get more of these. As you see, I'll move this away, and it will go out and get dim. Goes out. It's literally just a copper tube wrapped with paper. I was going to wrap aluminum over it too to make a tunable capacitor. Get it just perfect. It gets very bright. Sometimes you have to shut it off for a second, tune it, and click it on, and wha-bam! That's bright. Assuming even less power now. But god damn, that's bright. Wow. Free energy. Don Smith wasn't lying. All we gotta do is self-loop it somehow. That puppy's giving off heat. Stay tuned. You can literally see how it's connected. Antenna, earth ground, antenna, rectifier, runs the load. It can't get any simpler. Like, it literally cannot get any simpler.
I know, Mike, he didn't show it.
Cables go to the conjugator coil. And this thing's giving off heat. A lot of heat.
He's got a Tesla coil there too, doesn't he?
Yeah, more come. Yeah. Stay tuned.
I know he didn't show it, but what he has there is a rectenna. He's basically got a half-wave bridge rectifier hooked up to a capacitive plate, and then he's got the two sides hooked up to an LED bulb. It's kind of important that the LED bulb is in play because he's got a full-wave bridge rectifier that he hasn't mentioned inside the LED bulb, and also a smoothing capacitor. So his half-wave rectifier being picked up by his rectenna pickup plate is taking the scalar potentials received from the transmission terminal, the sphere, as you mentioned, Bernie, of his Tesla transmitter, which is basically like Mike from Faraday said, a Slayer exciter. And that's transmitting to that aluminum foil plate and being rectified by the half-wave rectifier, put into the load and smoothed with the bulb that has a capacitance to the surrounding environment, which is why when he picks it up, it gets a lot brighter.
Oh. Because he added resistance?
He had a capacitance, and that capacitance allowed more current to flow through the rectenna.
Well, pretty much exactly what you were saying, Mike Faraday, earlier on the more you add, the better it runs.
That is correct, yes. As you load it more, you get synchronization of the transmitter and receiver.
Mike, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Wasn't sure. What was the other ones that I wanted to show of his stuff? Extracting waves of ground power using Tesla coil as an energy pump. That was the one. Oh, and we got Oso joining to explain the atmospheric electricity.
All right.
Got some kind of crazy effect going on here. So I have 3 antenna rectifiers grounded. And I tested this with all power off, and it still works the same. I'm pulling almost a 1/4 amp at 150 volts out of the ground. It's enough power to light an incandescent light bulb. So I'll show that. And ba-boom. Literally enough power out of the ground to run an incandescent load.
That
From
is
the Tesla
significant.
coil. It's an incandescent light bulb.
So how's he
Something
getting
burned
it
my
out of the
finger.
ground?
So it's probably about 30 watts coming out of the ground now.
He has a pickup terminal nearby his transmitter.
As you see, pulling out a decent amount of power. Transmitter is consuming 39 watts, so we're almost at the break-even point. Here's the transmitter. I noticed if I move the transmitter far away, my ground current increases for some reason. So the transmitter's powered on. Got it tuned really perfectly. A lot of power coming out of them. I love
There's
this
a
thing.
phase shift loss as you increase
I
phase
like-
only consumes 30
I like
to 80
the
watts,
lid of
depending
a
on how much
pot
you
is
crank
his
it.
transmitter. Do you
My
see
goal is to use it
It's a pot
as a
lid.
pump to suck
Yeah.
energy out of the ground. And
You just need some
That
kind of
goal is
capacitive
occurring,
terminal, and
so-
that works perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
Really outside
DIY,
of the
do it at
ground.
home kind of stuff, and we should really all be doing this.
155 volts DC. All it is antenna diodes and a bridge rectifier configuration grounded. Very heavy grounding going on. So again, I'll shut the transmitter off and our power level drops to nothing. Transmitter on. There's your power getting sucked out of the ground into the form of an energy pump. Transmitter off. You can see we have no voltage either. Pretty much no voltage. Go back to current. Transmitter back on. And again, it can run an incandescent light bulb to just about full brightness. I'm getting about 30 watts out of the ground. And I'm only consuming about 30 to 39. So look at that. And that gets hot quick. I'll try and hold that on there and show that it doesn't drain power from the load. It's going to be tricky to do. Yeah, I need...
I paused it there for a minute. We have Oso with us, and you were going to help us understand some atmospheric electricity, if that is correct.
Yeah, so is that Jeremiah there?
Yeah, is that Frankie there?
No, this is Ross.
Oh, Ross. Jeez,
Yeah.
Ross. Dude, awesome. Oh,
Yeah,
wait.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
now we got Tim? Wait,
What's
we got
Tim
Boyd,
doing in
Ross,
here?
Hey, fellas.
Tim,
Yeah.
Mike. Oh, this is awesome. Now
Where's
we're
is,
getting
Jer-
good.
is Jeremy here?
He was.
Not yet. He was.
He
Okay.
might come back.
I want to make sure he's doing his presentation tomorrow. That's what I'm doing. I'm chasing presenters, conference presenters.
Okay, well, we definitely are. So
Backroom Bernie? Jeremy's not back there, is he?
no, he's not at the moment.
Blasted, we lost him. Tim could have got his answer right away.
And then Bernie, you're doing something tomorrow, right? You're doing something tomorrow too, right?
Yes, sir. I got my segment all together.
Okay. I don't think I got the page updated correctly. I don't know.
And I might mention something as well, because Tim, you've had me on with the my inertial propulsion.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So the guy Mike Marsden we keep talking about, the guy who we got all these ideas from initially.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole spacecraft propulsion engine, we call it a linear thrust engine. That's just one of his technologies. I mean, he has multiple things he's working on as well. And he kind of let me in on one other secret that he's working on as well. And I mentioned just now, it's the atmospheric engine. It doesn't produce electricity, it's not from the atmosphere itself. It's not like static electricity or anything. So you guys are more like electricians and you all into that kind of stuff. I'm more of a mechanical kind of guy. So I understood what he's talking about.
Okay.
So,
there's Jeremy. There. Reese.
Guys, sorry, I had a call from an old friend. I don't know if you guys remember Ken Griggs.
Yeah. Hold on. Jeremy, you're doing presentation tomorrow, right?
Yes, I am. I'm
Ooh, yes.
I'm going to be doing it.
Okay. So we've saved another APEC. We're sliding into home plate, right? We're on the.
What I want to do with I want to start doing. I want to do an episode where we talk about the fact that if we have an energy source that's strong enough and powerful enough, it doesn't really matter what the propulsion technology is, and that we should work on trying to talk about alternative energy sources and different ideas for energy sources and explore some of that stuff scientifically. I don't know, but I just don't want to get too deep into the the free energy stuff and end up down the PES wiki rabbit hole with Sterling Allen or anything. But yeah, you're good.
I like Michael Perrone's stuff.
Yeah, he's got some good ideas. I got a bunch of new people that I've been getting sent stuff on. That guy Garrett Modell. Have you heard of him before? He's out of the University of Colorado Boulder, and he'd be an interesting guy to interview. He talks a lot about this, 0 point and the Casimir effect, and the fact that we're surrounded by this cosmic microwave background radiation and all this other anomalous, background noise that we could potentially, set up harvesters and harvest from background radiation with the right antennas. And I thought up this idea. I made a video on it with my 0 point energy video like 15 years ago, just talking about a crystal where the whole array was a series of diodes or plates, that would take minute fluctuations in the electromagnetic field. Of course, it's random and it's all directions. So you'd have to build something that's, that takes that into account and is completely three-dimensional. And that might be a little bit more complex.
That's you. Now Ross is going to drive a machine through the wall of his house.
Yeah.
Well, can I mention, because you talk about energy production there?
Yeah, if you got enough energy, man, it doesn't matter.
Just jumped on, so I want to mention what I was explaining. So this guy Mike Marsden. So he's basically, he's a physicist, engineer, and all around very smart guy. So he's working on a lot of different technologies. So the one part was the inertial propulsion or linear thrust for future spacecraft engines. The other one was energy production right here on Earth. And you could also do it probably in space as well. But so anytime us humans, we make electricity, we rotate things. We have magnets and coils.
Yeah.
So you have to have motion. So something has to, it's usually just spinning a rotor. So we've done it through internal combustion engines, through diesel generators or whatever, or even rotating, on a water wheel and something has to be rotating. So there's magnets and then there's coils. So as there's
you're driving it with combustion with like a fuel like kerosene or gasoline.
Even having water flow over a waterfall, and it spins a water wheel. It just spins and spins. So that hydroelectricity, I mean, there has to be a mechanical motion. Something just keeps rotating around and around and around.
What about solar panels?
Well, that's okay. That's different. That doesn't. That produces electricity.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's photoelectric effect. That's Einstein. It's just E equals h nu. It's bouncing. It's the energy of the photons of the light coming in, bouncing.
It's also what powers all plants too. So it's
even wind turbines. There's a differential.
Yeah, wind and hydro are very similar.
There's like a high pressure zone, and the air flows through a vector to the low pressure area, and it physically hits the impeller and basically spins it around and produces electricity. So Mike Marsden came up with a way to how can you just perpetually spin something around, like an actual physical thing around and around forever and ever and ever and produce electricity without having to burn fuel like we're doing now. And I've never heard of anybody think of such an idea. It's insane. But the atmospheric pressure itself. So I'll explain. Like, so if you go in the ocean and you're under the water, the deeper you go, the more pressure you feel because there's gravity pulling down on the earth, and so the deeper you go, you have more water above you. So it's crushing you down and tighter the further you go down under the liquid water. It's a physical phenomenon. So it's literally the deeper you go, you're not doing anything. It's just the gravity is just physically squishing you.
It's a system of trillions and trillions of atoms just trying to reach a state of equilibrium.
Well, it's also the trillions and trillions of atoms above you. They're like adding all that weight on top of you.
I'm just setting you up for now. Think about the atmosphere, the wind that we're surrounded by. Mm-hmm. There's oxygen. There's 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and 1% argon. That's already just in our Earth's atmosphere. I mean, every other planet has different compositions of whatever air they call it, but in our air is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% argon. So that's a physical atoms that are floating up there above us. And there's how many miles? I forgot how many miles. 368,000 feet of air above us until you get into space. So we're down here on the bottom. We're all being squished by all this air that's just crushing and holding our bodies together. And I mean, when you breathe, I'm not sucking air in. I'm just opening my mouth, and then my diaphragm just opens my lungs, and then the gravity just shoves the air into my mouth. I'm not sucking the air in. I'm just opening my mouth, and then God is just pressure
differential.
He's shoving the air into my lungs.
So it's the differential that you create a lower pressure in your lungs with the muscle movement of your diaphragm,
So he starts a vacuum, a pure vacuum. He creates a pure vacuum initially. Like even if you open up like a can of fruit, and you open up and you hear that suck sound because air just goes boop. It fucking plops in there instantly. Like when you open it up, it's like a vacuum seal. So you see the air just go and it fills it, and then it's filled. And you're like, oh fuck, okay.
It takes a certain amount of energy to remove that air with a vacuum.
He's figured out how to you open up the thing, and it's like it's still a vacuum. And you're like, oh shit, and the air just keeps going, and you close it up and it stops, and then you open it up, and the air just keeps, and it's like a perpetual can. I'm giving you like the analogy. So
okay, so this you were saying this perpetually rotates at some point. Right?
Yeah. So
that's where you're going with it.
Yeah. So here's the idea. So you're like, where the fuck does all that air go? You know what I mean? Like it can't just like go to nowhere. So here's the crazy thing. So air, I mean, everything in the universe is solid, a liquid, or a gas, or also a what do they call it? A plasma. But anyway, so it's gas, liquid, solid. So those are the three states, and the only thing that makes up the different states is energy. So if you put more energy in, it's no longer a liquid; it becomes a gas. It expands because you're adding heat to the So our sun has been beating down on our atmosphere for centuries and centuries, and heating up this oxygen, this liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen that's been around, and it's like heated up and turned. It's like taking water and you boil a pot of water and steam goes everywhere, and it's like, oh my god, steam is like it's like a whole room full of steam. We're in a room full of like boiled oxygen, boiled nitrogen, boiled argon. So that's basically the energy source. It's already there. It's just this huge planet full of all this heated up molecules of, so that's basically what the energy is. So what's happening is when it's going into this can, this perpetual can, it's turning into like liquid. It becomes liquid oxygen. So he takes a whole city, a fucking city full of air, like the whole entire state of Virginia where I'm in. And all of that air turns into one glass of oxygen and nitrogen. I mean,
but
I'm exaggerating a little.
Liquefying though, and like, doesn't that reaction take the energy out of it, or like prevent the homogeneity? No.
Well, what I'm saying, okay, so now you're wondering, like, how the hell does like the air turn into? I mean, all you would have to do is cool it down, and it would naturally do that. Like if you had lots and lots of coolers and you cooled an entire city full of air, it would just naturally shrink into.
Well, if you compress air, it gets cold. So
no, you compress anything. If you compress,
if you take nitrogen, like you said, 71% nitrogen. I've used liquid nitrogen before. You just it's just compressed. It's basically
it's not. You don't.
It really is.
But you don't compress it to get it into that can.
No, you get it in a cylinder, and you go buy it at the.
Yeah, you buy it, and guess
you buy the big doers of liquid nitrogen.
But guess how they do it? They use huge factories that have massive coolers in there, and they cool and cool down the nitrogen until it gets into this little can of nitrogen.
Right, so, but it takes a lot of energy to do that.
Yeah, well, exactly. They're cooling it down.
It's not free.
Yes, I know, but I'm just trying to set you up to think about it. Think about how.
But where's the spin? Where's the spin come from?
Exactly. The energy is required to cool it. Then you're not getting the free.
Yeah, here's how he gets a whole city of air into a can like this of liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen. So it'd be a 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen and 1% argon. A whole city of air in this can.
Okay.
So he does it physically through counter-rotating impeller blades. So when he creates that vacuum, that 0 PSI, that 0 vacuum that the air just wants to keep going down into that tube I was saying, like like you're opening a can, like the vacuum sealed can, and it just going in. It's not going into a can. It's like an air intake. So it's going in there. And as it's going in, it hits physical counter-rotating impeller blades. I gotta.
So it's creating two vortices that are intersecting. Correct.
Well,
you know what I mean by a vortice?
They're opening with two impeller blades.
I have to explain this as well. So
okay, hold on, everybody. Pause for a second. Particularly you, Ross. I think I missed which story of a power system this was, and I'd be able to follow along quite a bit better if I knew whose power system you were talking about. And
Mike Marsden. It's not published anywhere. I've never even read anybody if they've even thought of such a concept. So I mean, I know I'm probably blowing the shit out of your minds right now, and it's really, I mean, it's going to probably take a while for you to digest.
Well, I'd like to blow my mind, but right now I'm just trying to understand exactly who you're talking about so that I can grasp the concept in its entirety. It sounds like
I
you're
want
trying
to
to
know.
take thermokinetic energy from, or not you, but this guy, Morrison, was taking the thermokinetic energy from a very, very, very large city-sized volume of air. He's converting that Brownian
already
into
air.
a differential.
It's just air.
Semiotically.
It's air outside. It's air that's already in our city.
Right. So you've got Brownian motion, right? You've got heat
cool.
trapped. When you compress it, you have access to all that heat. And if you
don't
use
compress
that Brownian motion through thermokinetic converters, then
You don't compress it. You just got impeller blades, right?
Yeah, you just turn on the machine and you open up the air intake, and then the air just starts going in. And as it's going in, it just turns into liquid. It turns itself physically into a liquid because it's hitting these counter-rotating impeller blades. And as it's going in, it goes in at about 1,100 RPM. I mean, 1,100 miles per hour. So I was going to explain this real quick. So if you're on a spaceship and you have to survive as a human, you have to put 14.7 psi of pressure in the spacecraft to simulate our Earth pressure, right? So if someone you see in the movies when someone opens up the door of the spacecraft and all of a sudden all that pressurized air sees a vacuum and it goes boom, it just instantaneous goes out the door. Or like if you're in an airplane and you take a gun and you shoot the side of the window, whoosh, air just starts going out. You're like, fuck, because there's pressure.
You're talking about an ocean of like negative pressure differential versus, however many moles of air are trapped inside your air cabin of your spacecraft.
I'm trying to set it up so your mind thinks about what happens.
What is going on inside this?
Like, it sounds like you need a hole between like outer space and the atmosphere to like achieve that sort of.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's almost like his machine is like he has this like a black hole to space, and you turn it on, and our atmosphere just starts whooshing in, and you're like, where the fuck is it all going? It just keeps going in as though it's going into like space.
All right,
so now could you use this device to take the CO2 out of the air?
So it takes all the air and
I know, but you said it turns it into a liquid. Okay,
liquid
each of these. So I've worked with different cryogens. Okay, like CO2 isn't a liquid when it gets cold; it turns into a solid. You can buy it at the supermarket. Okay. So different nitrogen is liquid at like 72 degrees Kelvin. Okay,
it's like negative 278 degrees.
So to turn and oxygen is I don't remember what the temperature is for oxygen, but it's still pretty cold.
Yeah, it's like a little bit higher. Nitrogen is colder, has a colder.
Right. So my point is that the CO2, because it's a solid, it should float. It should be above, it should be basically it should precipitate out is what I'm trying to say.
If you were to cool it down,
you could remove it and then use it as a device to remove CO2 from the atmosphere.
Another thing you said is that you said like the entire city's worth of nitrogen in the air. When we turn that into liquid nitrogen, it would fit inside my beer can. But if
or maybe not a city. Okay, it's not a city. I was exaggerating. Maybe like 100 cubic yards of air will turn into a can or something.
Here's the thing: if that were true, then when we did those experiments with the liquid nitrogen in the lab, Jeremiah.
I was thinking the same thing, Jeremy.
That turned to gas if it expanded at that much of a factor.
There's a mathematical formula for this. It says it right in the physics book.
equals nRT. Yeah,
it's 800 to 1. So if you take 800 parts of liquid and you expand it 800 times, that's gas. That's gaseous expansion. That's the natural.
It seems like you're missing the energy required to put it back and forth between the two phases and compress it.
There's something called latent heat as well. That are you aware of what latent heat is in phase changes? in physics.
I'm just trying to explain to you all how this machine works. I mean,
You have a video of this machine?
he won't share it with anybody. But I will email you all the pictures of the turbine, the counter and rotating impeller blades, and things like that, so you can see that he's actually has this thing. But I'm just trying to explain it as best. I mean, because I'm not like, I don't have a PhD myself. I'm just, from what he explained it to me, I'm trying, and it took me a long time. It took me like months to get my head around all this and go, oh my God, he really, that's how it's working. Like, oh, because I mean, when you see it, it's like, that's impossible. This got to be like a trick. It's
You
not
know what?
a trick.
This grid that we're in, I'm just looking at that. We look like a really messed up version of the Brady Bunch intro, don't we?
I need a hat. I need a hat like small.
Nerdy down there in the corner.
It's a glitch in the matrix.
It's a glitch in the Matrix.
So,
Dun, dun,
Ross,
dun, dun. It's the story.
I think I missed, again, still something fundamental here. Is this a machine which produces extra energy output? Is this an air pump? Is this a wind turbine? I mean, what exactly is this thing that we're talking about? Because I still don't know what the heck it is that we are talking about.
Yeah, so there's already energy up in the sun has warmed up our liquid oxygen and liquid nitrogen and
What's
turned
it
it into
output?
gas.
Is it output heat? Does it output electric power?
Rotation, and then
it outputs
I'll be right back,
rotational energy.
rotation, but then he puts copper coils and magnets on them like a regular electricity generator, and as these counter rotating impeller blades spin, it's just producing electricity. So it's just another way to physically make something spin around, like a wheel spin around in a circle, to make electricity. But he's using the atmospheric energy to do so.
So in the simplest sense, Ross, we're talking about a really, really, really effective wind turbine here.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way
I
of
can
explaining.
follow you now. Thank you.
That's a
That's
great
what I needed to know.
Yeah, because like a wind turbine, think about it. That's a great point right there. A wind turbine takes the northern part of America, which is near Canada, which has a different pressure, and the wind is flowing towards Texas, where all the wind generators are, which has a lower pressure. So it's a higher pressure flowing to a lower pressure. That's exactly what's happening here with this machine.
So it's like an atmospheric wind generator, essentially.
Exactly. It's just on a nano scale, like a super nano scale. Instead of like having like a huge turbine blade up in Texas that's like 800 feet high with these blades that are like 600 feet across, and they're spinning around and around in circles. You know what I mean? And you're just hoping that like a bunch of wind from Canada flows down towards Mexico and hits this blades and spins it around. You're like, oh my God, now I'm producing electricity. Yay. Instead of doing that, you say, fuck that shit. You just turn on the vacuum and all of a sudden, whoosh, air just flows into this tube.
So you said counterflow rotation. How big is the thing that's rotating?
The whole machine is like this big. It's like 12 inches around or something.
Okay.
But there's counter. So there's 7 counter rotating impeller blades. They spin around.
Okay, and how big is the impeller blade?
They're like 12 inches around in a circle.
Okay.
So it's the whole thing is a really small machine. But as the wind is coming in, like I was saying, remember in the spacecraft example, when you open up a door on a spacecraft and all that air instantly flows out very fast, right?
We get the principles behind it.
But do you know how fast? Do you know how fast the wind would flow out of the spacecraft? Because that there is a mathematical formula for this. They know this. NASA knows this.
Well, it depends on how big the hole is, too.
Well, it doesn't matter. If you take a pressurized spacecraft, NASA has this written down, and you open up the door and all the air instantly flows out of the door, how fast. Do you know how fast it would flow out? Do you know how?
Again, that depends on the size of the actual hole that's suddenly being opened and how fast it's open.
Yeah, so if it's like a little micro meteor comes in and pokes a hole in the skin of the thing.
If you still measured at that hole, NASA knows this.
The velocity is dependent on the temperature, the pressure, and the size of the hole, and the differential between the inside and the outside. So what I want to really know about the system, Ross, is do you have any idea? I mean, could you even estimate roughly, just guessing at it, it's not an exact number, how much power he was generating with this system? I mean, do you have any idea at all what he was running with it?
It's just like a regular electricity generator. It's
but a regular electricity generator could be anything from like powering an LED to like literally powering an entire city. So
no, this one.
That's why I'm asking. Do you have an idea?
We need a diagram of it and pictures.
The small one can only power your house, maybe, or like a couple refrigerators.
So the 12-inch could power your house, basically. This
something like that.
Thing.
Yeah, it's a small
a kilowatt hour of power.
Yeah, something like that. But
that sounds about reasonable.
But what I'm saying, I still want to go back. How fast? What does NASA say in their books? What do you know? What NASA wrote in their book? How fast? The fastest the air could go out. How do you know how fast it could go out? Like any idea? Like 5 miles per hour, 10, 20, 100, a million? I mean, how fast? How many miles per hour do you think it goes out? Like, do you have any idea?
The maximum it can go is about 747 miles per hour, which is the speed of sound.
It's a lot. It's 1,100 miles per hour. It's almost 1,100 miles per hour. 14.7 psi of pressure on our planet that they pressurize their spacecraft to, which is at sea level. 14.7 psi at 20 degrees Celsius, the average temperature. If you take air, normal air, like the average mean air that we see on our Earth, that has a kinetic energy, or what they call, NASA calls the root mean square, the RMS, root mean square. It's called the root mean square of air. It's almost 1,100 miles per hour. It's like 1,060 something miles per hour. It's over 1,000 miles per hour. So when this guy turns on his machine, that hole I was telling you, that air intake, the air is fucking going in at over 1,000 miles per hour. I'm talking about like it's a garden hose. Like you could just.
That's the muzzle velocity. Yeah,
it's insane. It's insane. How much?
Sure, it's not feet.
Is that what?
You sure it's not feet per second?
No, it's 1,000 per second. Over 1,000 miles.
It's feet per second. Yeah.
I don't know how fast that is in feet per second, but over
Ross,
1,000.
No, I mean the number that you got, the 1,100 miles per hour, is actually 1,100 feet per second for the velocity of the Brownian motion converted into a sound.
Yeah. So this is what I said: 747 miles per hour, which is approximately 1,100 feet per second.
It's not hindered by the speed of sound. It's not. It's faster than that. It's over 1,000 miles per hour. Over 1,000 root mean square of the RMS of air at 14.7 psi on Earth. The average pressure of air from 14.7 psi flowing to zero.
Is that why when you poke a balloon it goes pop?
1,100 miles per hour.
That's what it means. Yeah.
Say what?
But
I said, is that why when you poke a helium balloon it goes pop?
I've got a couple other
because it's going that fast, it goes pop, and that's the sonic shock wave. It's
there's no zero psi, zero vacuum around a balloon. But what I'm saying is, like on the space shuttle, not the space shuttle, but the International Space Station, if you opened up a door full wide, not like a prick hole, a full door, like an 8-foot door, and they measured it, and NASA said this, the wind would be flowing out at almost 1,100 miles per hour. This is well documented.
So
all science fiction
Where's the document?
We're BS. You know how they always they open the airlock and everybody goes flying out?
Yeah, they go flying out. They would go flying out. over 1,000 miles per hour. But I mean, anyways, why do y'all care? Like, why are y'all so obsessed about what exactly the feet per second, miles per hour? Anyway, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
dude, it's a nerd thing.
Do you see how like
yes, it is
awesome
Yes.
this guy's idea is?
It's fascinating, but we need to get the schematics and go over it a little bit more. It's hard to have. We know you're excited about it, Ross, but it's hard to have you explain it when you don't understand all of the inner workings of it, and we don't have visuals to go along with it. I do need to cover a couple other topics here, though, while I still have Tim here.
I'm going to go get a drink.
Hey,
all right, but Tim, remember,
Just
think about it. Just think about that idea. If you ever want me to have that in the future on a future presentation, I will get all the pictures and stuff together and have a better explanation if you want.
Tim?
He's there.
Okay. So this is what we're going to be presenting tomorrow a bit, the star in the jar cold fusion transmutations that Jeremiah was able to reproduce.
You're gonna throw that thing on APEC again? Remember, we didn't achieve helium-3 with that.
We did. Say that again.
We didn't achieve the helium-3 fusion with that. You see the same color change
right here.
Well, yes. When I got the electrodes really close, we got a few reactions, but they were extremely small, and they're gonna almost be impossible to prove. Which is why I just have received earlier today, the thermometers needed to show the thermal output and the gain in power versus thermal energy output from power input. So yeah, where we almost short the electrodes there, we do get some fusion events, but it's still not, we're not stabilized in helium-3 production. We're not properly fusing the hydrogen into helium at this point. So it's still not stable.
Yeah. So I'll explain that it's what the step in progress, and that in order to get the sustained reaction, you've got to use the variacs as the power supply to get that purple-white plasma up that you're seeing there. And then it should be able to produce the helium-3 at a large enough number to collect it and test it, right? Jeremiah?
It's 7 times the power input. The variac is just a power regulator. That's it. But it's 7 times the power input. And here's the key. You need to surround the entire cathode, which is that center electrode made of tungsten. It has to be completely surrounded with plasma. And if any water touches it, it will destroy the reaction. So the whole idea is that any hydrogen coming from the water electrolyte mixture enters into a plasma, and its electrons are flung off back into the water mass as its protons are accelerated towards the cathode and then bombard into each other, producing the helium fusion reaction. At that same time, some of the neutrons are bumped off, and you end up with a helium fusion where the hydrogens actually are absorbed, or a small percentage of them, into the tungsten, transmuting it as well. That's where you get your H3 instead of your H2. Did any of that make sense? I hope so. Main point is this. That cathode needs to be completely surrounded in plasma in order to provide the reaction. And in this reaction that we're watching on video, that cathode has fluctuating plasma over the surface, and water is contacting it, which takes away energy from the total reaction potential. That's stopping us from achieving a stable H3 reaction.
Yeah, so it's that this is like a step in proving the reaction and the oh my god, can't think of the words right now, brain fart. A proof of concept of the transmutations, and that this is one step in the building the overall reactor for the sustained reactions of it.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it a sort of a semi-proof of concept. It
Eh,
seems that it's already producing extra thermal output because the momentary points at which there is a plasma and we do get hydrogen protons flying in, we end up getting some H3 reaction, but it's so unstable that we end up with more byproducts than we derive from the actual H3. So it's very difficult to tell, and that's why we get deposits in the bottom of the container. I've collected them so far. I've been collecting all my deposits of transmuted elements because I may have them analyzed, but so far, yeah, it's simply not stable.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim that it is a stable reaction that we have on that, because clearly it's not, but it's a step in proving the proof of concept with it that the next test you'll be doing, you'll be adding to get that sustained plasma in it, and that you're building and reproducing the exact experiment that I showed in last month's APEC, the video that I played of it. And
right.
that,
I guess if you were going to emphasize anything, it's the fact that it's made in a tiny little jar that took all of maybe less than an hour in total for somebody just trying this the first time to put together. And this could be played with by almost anybody that has a jar and a tungsten welding electrode, which you can buy on Amazon or eBay for stupidly cheap. And it's not at all one of those things which is totally off the table or outside the realm of something folks could play around with. This is a device which you can build at home, and you can build it for less than $20.
and I'll also include the email back with all the notes that Bob Greenier gave to me on this once I showed it to him as well for it, and a few other aspects of it.
Hate to say, but I know the first thought of any academic watching this is, well, if you could build it for less than $20 and do it at home, obviously fusion would have been proven many, many decades ago, and there's nothing to this. We're all wasting our time. And to that, I would say, go ahead and ask any professor. Go find this replication in any university with proper measurements. Go ahead and ask any company if they've ever tested this. Go ahead and find the papers of the disproofs. I'd love to see the disproofs. I'd love to see all of the records, one after the other, of how many times this has been tested and completely debunked. Oh, wait, that's right. They don't exist. Why? Because if it can be done with less than $20 in an afternoon, then, of course, there's no way it could be valid. So there you go. You won't find any disproofs. You won't find any proofs. The trouble is that if you do create proofs and you do take the measurements and you report them officially in any kind of major way, they're going to be ignored anyways because there's too many variables. And we don't like variables in the scientific and academic community.
Well, there's a way around that. If it's reproducible, you can patent it.
Well, no patents for me anyways. Not now, not ever. And probably for most of the people, I would say that that's one of those shared things. It's fairly common. We don't really go for patents. Well, there is Rossi, though, right? There is Rossi, and he's got that ECAT system. There is the, what's the sun simulator? These guys are boiling water.
I want to do something on that. I want to do.
What's the name of that, Tim?
I'm going to do a show on that.
Sapphire Project. Is that the one or no? Sapphire? Yes, no, maybe so. What's
related? I mean, there's a specific name of the exact reactor that's been shown. It's like, I want to say 7 feet wide, 6 feet tall. It's a huge drum. And in their videos, you just see this blazingly bright reaction taking place inside this huge drum and steam shooting out the top like no tomorrow. I don't remember what the name of it is.
Let me ask you, why no patents, Jeremiah? And I already probably know, but why no patents?
Well, you already know. Yeah.
Yeah. So and this is why I want to dig down and do more on this, because the thing that gets me is, right, this is like going up a level, going up the scope. If a sizable percentage of the American public doesn't trust their government, that's like a big problem. And I'm not just talking about patents. I'm talking about right now, okay, over this, these are old numbers. Several years ago, over 80% of the American public believed in the existence of UFOs. Well, I'm sure that number is much higher now. Along with that is probably the belief that the government is not being honest. And after this Nimitz exhibit, right, after this Nimitz stuff happened, that's even more likely. So you've got that, and then you've got this, without going into details, right, because I don't want to piss people off, but we'll say in the U.S., half the country pretty much believes one guy got elected. The other half the country pretty much believes another guy got elected. So half the country there thinks somebody's lying, right? Depending on where you fall, it could go either way. But so when you add all this stuff up, I mean, really, when you get down to the brass tacks of it, the problem is the vast majority of Americans don't trust the government, right? I mean, and that's a problem. I mean, that's a big problem, because then you run into stuff like, I mean, the whole, there's got to be some level of implicit trust, and and I'm not saying that's wrong. I think, and the thing that gets me about this is, okay, so my elderly mother, she's 81 years old now. This is a vaguely terrifying story. She was like, the first time, she's like, before the Gary Powers incident, that was the first time that I had the inkling that the government could lie. I'm like, Gary Powers, right? Michael probably knows. Michael, you've heard about Gary Powers, right?
He was the spy, right?
YouTube.
That was the U2 spy plane.
Yeah.
That's so mom's a little on the old side, right? That was the 1950s.
Yeah, she probably remembers Duck and Cover like me.
54, yeah. It was
No, she did. She did. Yeah, Duck and Cover. That was the yep.
It was the
Duck
same
and Cover.
year that Lee Harvey Oswald was sheep dipped to Russia as a to basically infiltrate Russian intelligence, and when he failed, he came back to the U.S. and they sent him to Dallas and figured that he would make a perfect patsy.
Yeah, I got a theory on that.
They've lied about a lot.
Do you want to hear my JFK theory? I can do that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so let me see. I'm not going to out him, but I'll give it in a sec. But the larger point is this, right? Whether or not you believe in anti-gravity or UFOs or psychic powers or anything that's off the radar of normal, right? I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people don't trust the government. And again, that's a problem, and it's not my problem. It's all of our problem, right? Because the problem is these social institutions fail when nobody puts faith in them. So.
Well, I think it's intergenerational trauma. Seriously, it's intergenerational
Of
trauma.
all of it. They've been lying to us forever on so many.
Basically, we're not dealing with the trauma that our parents. So, I mean, we get a whole history is written by the people that are liars, essentially.
No,
Well,
I get what you're saying, Mike.
And if you know, once you know, and when you know the real history of like America, for example, and how much slavery was involved. For example, we hear about African slavery, but most of the Native Americans were enslaved. And a Native American slave, a black slave was worth 22 times what a Native American slave was. And like where Columbus landed, Columbus is like we have a Columbus Day. Well, Columbus Day celebrates essentially the extinction of Native Americans. Because if you look in Americans' demographics currently, it's like it's roughly 13% African American.
Well, what is
less than 1% Native American.
Boyd, I
does
understand
that?
what you're saying. Like you're talking about.
So
having
we
genetic
haven't dealt with that trauma, and
Right.
it's
It's
institutionalized.
epigenetic trauma.
It used to be the law was that slavery was legal, and then when they passed the 13th Amendment, we didn't abolish slavery. We just abolished slavery for people that weren't in jail. So people that are in the criminal justice system, they're still considered slaves under the 13th Amendment. So really, it's a cultural violence that we are passing on to the next generation by not dealing with it. Okay, and it's not just a problem in the USA. It's a world problem. And really, the only solution is to talk about it. We got to talk about it. We got to get over the stigma, the whole stigma, UFO stigma, racial stigma. All that stuff is because of this cultural violence, because of intergenerational trauma, and we don't deal with it. We don't talk about it, and that's really, that's where I think it's coming from. And I think people are starting to wake up, though. People are starting to wake up that,
Michael Boyd, could we call that genetically transferred trauma, aka
it's called epigenetics. It's called epigenetics.
That's what I was saying.
So it doesn't, your genes don't change. It changes how they're expressed. So, like, for example, your increased likelihood of alcoholism and drug addiction. People develop coping mechanisms to deal with trauma. And you learn it from your parents when you're like 2 or 3. And a lot of times things happen to you when you're a little kid that you carry along your whole life because you didn't deal with that trauma that you had. Because you didn't know how to deal with it because you learned it from your parents. But the thing about it is figuring out, each of us has to figure out what that trauma is and then talk about it. Because you can't just, and you don't just talk about it to like your friends, talking about it to your family members, because they all have the same things. We're all the same. We all have the same feelings and needs. We may disagree about politics or religion or whatever, or anti-gravity. right?
Well,
but we all basically have the same needs and feelings, and that's where
if you're able to work through it, though. See, one of the things they've done studies that showed that repeatedly accessing traumatic memories renews the trauma, and that was in children who were victims of molestation. My first wife worked with children who had issues, and that was one of the things that she had found, is that a lot of those kids were in therapy. The problem is the therapy kept putting them through the trauma again and again and again. So with intergenerational trauma, the challenge there is, can you work through it in a way that solves it, or are you just reliving it over and over again?
I agree, and it's a delicate thing, and it's not just the intergenerational problem. We've got what's called internal family system is the other thing, and basically where you got to deal, every individual has these different things that occurred. Like in I had actually therapy for where I was dealing with this, and I had to, what they do is they basically, there's like 3 parts of you. There's self is like happy, playful, it's like you're naturally giving, that kind of part. And then you have these other 3 personalities. One's called your firefighter, and that's like basically alcohol, tended to addiction and stuff like that. The basically coping mechanism part. And then there's this internal critic part, or your conscious, you call your conscious. That's one of your personalities. And then there's this other part of your personality. It's called your outcast. And it's like when you're in rage, or you're really afraid, or, you know, basically it's this part of you that you try and keep away from coming out. Okay. And we all have these parts to us. Okay. And so what I had to do to deal with this is my therapist basically talked to each of my personalities and got my self-critic to go sit down so that they could talk to my outcast to find out what was the true root cause of my trauma. And I totally repressed all these memories. And I went back to when I was 4.5 years old. I got lost at the New York World's Fair for like 2 or 3 hours. And when my mom found me, she wasn't there for me. See, I felt like I had been abandoned and I was an orphan. And that goes back to intergenerational trauma, because my grandpa was an orphan and he abandoned my dad when he went to the Antarctic, and so my grandma had to put my dad and aunt into an orphanage for 8 years. So it's like this abandonment thing. And so as a result, for years and years, I would stay in relationships with people where they were abusive to me. And it was because I was afraid of being alone. And so my therapist got me to go back and find this outcast part of me. She said, well, how old are you? She asked my outcast part, how old are you? And I said, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. And then I remembered. And then after I remembered and I made this connection to what this trauma that I experienced when I was a little kid, after that, I wasn't afraid anymore of being alone.
That's good. So you had an emotional breakthrough.
And that's called unburdening. They actually have a term for it. So what I'm suggesting is that we all have this trauma, and you're absolutely right. It's not something where, hey, you can just show someone to get them to go back, get them to deal with it.
Unburden society with the generational trauma of UFO lying and disclosure.
Well, yeah. Well, like my grandpa, you know, he went to Antarctica, and I've heard all these things about what happened down there during this, and how there was like the Nazis were working with the extraterrestrials and stuff, all this kind of stuff. And you know, it's reasonable if any of that, if there's even a grain of truth of that. Imagine the trauma that it caused to my grandpa.
Yeah.
And it would explain his behavior towards my grandma, and why he
would. I mean, I can relate.
He may not have been abandoning her. He may have been protecting her.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, Michael. I mean, geez, when I was growing up, I was sent to the hospital twice to get stitches for family-based inflicted injuries, and I've got stitches on my eyebrow and across my face, and on my arm. So it's something that's happened before. So I can certainly relate to this whole generationally passed trauma. There's a reason that I decided, for the betterment of humankind, not to have kids. And it's because I understand epigenetics is a real thing. Like, I'll pass it on to whoever I happen to breed with. And so,
well, no, you make the choice not to pass it on when you deal with your trauma in a healthy way.
It's true.
Dealing with it in a healthy way that's the issue. And basically what I think it goes back to is our culture is a dominance culture where it's built on reward and punishment, not on well-being. Like I said, we're all the same. We all have the same needs and feelings. Compassion is about understanding that. And then when you talk to people and you communicate with them, it's not about being correct. It's about finding truth. Because isn't that what we're all here for, to find truth?
Yeah, we want to uncover the great mysteries of the universe. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Well, finding connections, right?
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is at the base level, we're all connected because we're all the same.
Well, but I mean, truth is difficult because the problem is even if we're speaking the same truth, even if we believe the same truth, we're viewing it from a different light and different perspective, right? So,
Yeah,
so
yeah. And then
it's
plus we have this dominance culture to overcome where there's all this stigma. And this stigma creates a barrier to us finding truth. A lot of times we don't want to hear the truth. Literally, we don't
well,
want to hear it.
Yeah,
it
I
is.
mean, to quote Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, Dr. Hammond, whose truth? Yours or mine? And in response to, there's only one truth. Well, that's not exactly true now, is it?
Well, and that's the communication part, right? And
Right.
but yeah, and the stigma part too. And this is something that troubles me. And I'm sure at some point this will become a political issue. But I find it interesting that people people with I don't know what you call it, gay rights, right? Has had great strides forward, and that's wonderful. Now, transgender rights, if I'm using the right terminology, that's had great strides forward, and that's wonderful. But what troubles me is people who believe in UFOs or aliens are still stigmatized. Now, you could say, well, one of these is a biological, this, that, and the other thing. That's not the that's I don't personally see that as relevant. I think that the important thing is people with different perspectives are judged with bigotry, right? And it used to be people who were gay were, and it was okay to be bigoted against them because they're different than us. Well, now it's maybe people who go to a different church. There's always been that way with religion, you know, or people who believe in UFOs, or people who are interested in cold fusion. And for some reason, it's not okay to judge people by the color of their skin or any of those other factors, right? But it's totally okay to judge them by what they're interested in or what they believe in. And to me, that seems really hypocritical. I think that if we're going to have a truly, where they call it, we used to say colorblind society. Now it's not colorblind. We're just color aware, maybe, or color sensitive. I don't remember what new acronym we're using this week, but but if we're going to come up with a society that really values everyone, then I think that we need to value different perspectives as much as people's different physical attributes.
Yeah, well, it's like dogma. It's what it
Yeah.
comes down to.
Yeah.
Is, dogma is basically creates these cultural biases, and it's all cultural constructions that with stuff. If people look at each other as basically like themselves, I think they'd be more accepting of difference. I think that's the problem, is that where we have a culture built on have and have nots, and good and bad, and reward and punishment, basically we lose empathy for each other. And that's creating a barrier to communicating. And so it's basically it's an educational thing. We got to educate ourselves, and then we got to educate our kids that
I think overall we're making a lot of progress as a society, right? And again, the strides that you see, like in gay rights, trans rights,
Well,
I mean,
but
things
the original thing you brought up, Tim, about the political divisiveness that's permeating our society. It's not just America. It's in the UK too. All you got to do is bring up the word Brexit.
Well,
the
thing to me, what it seems like it comes down to is this need to be right.
Exactly.
And maybe that comes out of organized religion, way back when, right? Maybe that's where it originates. But it's this need. It's like, I'm right, and if you don't agree with me, by definition, you're wrong, you know, and it doesn't matter what that is. It's okay, here's how you live your life, and I do it this way, and I'm right, and I need to be right. Don't take that away from me, or else, you know, something bad will happen, you know. And that is what underlines, you know, because the minute you say something is right, then you create this narrow little path, and you're like, okay, you have to live like this, you know. You have to eat chocolate ice cream because vanilla is wrong, you know. You know, and it's, you know, but like, it seems like society in general is getting a lot better about that. It just seems like there are a few holdout areas, and one of the ones that
Well, I
bothers
think
me is
it's
people's
cyclical.
beliefs.
You know, we got to. It's like we had we went to the right with Trump, and then we went to the left, and it's like we have this overshoot. Okay. And you know, it's going to oscillate back and forth, and then eventually it's just going to like reach some
see,
kind of
okay,
equilibrium.
even and this, I want to avoid getting, I don't want to get too deep into politics because I don't
Oh,
want
well,
to
I'm just
upset
using it
everyone.
as
But
two different
but
sides.
here's the thing that bothers me, though, is the vast majority of Americans, right? I'm just talking about the US now, but the vast majority of Americans are moderates, which means we're all pretty close to the center. Some of us are a little bit more conservative on a few issues. Some of us are a little bit more liberal on some. And the problem is that we're forced to choose between these two extreme poles, right? Where it's like,
Exactly.
you know, it's like, okay, you know, maybe I want the economy to be better, so I have to vote for somebody who wants to make abortion illegal. Well, that's not what I want. I don't want that. I just want the economy a little better, right? You know,
Right.
or like, maybe I would like people to have more rights and freedoms. So now I have to vote for somebody who is going to, you know, try and run California off of solar power exclusively and drive up the cost of energy, you know.
And there's fire season.
Yeah, you know, and so it's like that's the part that's one of the things that bothers me, is that like everything has to be bundled up, right? It's like we politically, and I don't think that works, and I don't think it
No,
represents
and
any of it.
that's exactly what the problem is. But I'm just saying, this is a natural process that we go through.
Yes,
We
yeah.
we jerk to the right, and then we jerk to the left, and every so often we get someone in the middle. But really, it's got to get really bad before we can get up and pull ourselves out of the gutter.
And every 4 years, all of us, and this is
we think it's really bad, but you know, if you look at history, it was a lot worse. They used to allow firearms in the Congress, and they actually were people that shot each other in Congress during session. Some of the stuff they
That
said
might solve all our
would make
problems right now.
would make a porn star blush. Okay.
Yeah, actually,
I'm just saying.
I've heard that. I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that
People
they
think
edit the
that
record.
our
They edit.
politics is rough, and you know, and I kind of feel like it's kind of like a reality TV show is what it's become, unfortunately.
You know, it does. There's a part of me that wonders if some of it's not intentional, right? If it's not a distraction, you know, and I'm pretty sure I know what it's distracting from. It's distracting from the fact that they're like printing money, you know, like, you know, we're gonna run the entire country for 2 years by printing money, and they're like, you know, but look over here. There's something bad happening, and you need to be upset about it.
Yeah, well, they can't print money now. That's because they got a war, you know, and that's put the kibosh on printing the money. So, but in any case, now we got
the free power, and why we need the hydrogen, and we need to be studying the unities and these coils and all of it.
Yeah, but the problem is is money. You need money to make money, and unfortunately, when they keep printing money, you need a lot more money, and so.
And the inflation is pretty bad right now.
Yeah,
and that's hurting people.
So
you know?
it's.
Sorry, I know I'm on the wrong channel for that.
But I actually think there is hope but it's not going to come from the government. It's going to come from the private sector. And you guys are living examples of what I'm talking about. You may not realize it.
Well,
but you are.
Honestly, Michael Boyd,
What's that?
If we were to face our epigenetic trauma personally as individuals, and we were to overcome it, we would suddenly become so highly productive, so concretely conclusive, and so valid, we would dominate the industry. And there are a very small number of people who have completely conquered it, taken over it, everything from childhood to their current state and all the things that came before to condition them in those exact behaviors. If we could truly conquer that and really get on top of that, we'd be on top of the world. But the disfortunate is
I
we
don't know.
really
You
have
gotta be
major
careful.
issues.
You gotta. I feel like Bones. I feel like McCoy in Star Trek V. Right when that was the one where the Spock's brother heals everybody, and it was what he's like.
He what everybody? Spock's brother what?
Brother. Yeah, Spock's brother. He's wearing the robes and he heals everybody. He's like,
he
let me
heals
take
everybody.
your pain. Remember, that's the one where they. Remember that movie kind of sucked, but they had a couple of good moments. And he heals everybody. And one of those good moments was, and McCoy had trauma about his father's passing, and he said, "Don't take my pain. My pain makes me who I am. If you take my pain, it changes who I am on a fundamental basis."
I have to agree. I mean, I am the way I am because of the things that I went through as I was growing up and up to this point.
Right.
So I couldn't give it
that's-
up because I'm a rebel now, right? Like I don't want patents, I don't want these standard things, but I'm willing to just like literally give it away and put it into the hands of society because I believe in humanity. And I'm a bit delusional in the minds of the skeptics because I actually believe in people. Crazy, I know, but that's where I'm at.
Well, if you deal with your karmic delusions when you're alive, you don't have to deal with them when you die.
Either way, yeah,
because that's what they talk about in the in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. On the third day, what decides whether or not you go to nirvana is if you deal with your karmic delusions. And we all have karmic delusions. You know what karma is.
Wait, but nirvana is nothingness. So
exactly. There's no drama in nirvana.
So what I'm saying is maybe you don't want to deal with those so that way you don't just disappear, right?
Well, no, then if you don't deal with them, if you don't deal with your karmic delusions, then you get stuck in the garbage disposal and you become a ghost.
Right. You learn the lessons from dealing with your traumas because you already dealt with them. You had to live through that. You made mistakes. You did things that were stupid. You did basically animalistic human things along the path of figuring out, why am I acting this way? Why does this thing that somebody says affect me so strongly? Why am I having an emotional response to this kind of stimulation? And if you actually get through all those things and realize,
it's a
then
learning
we
experience.
really have the power to change our lives, change our outlook on the world. It's only at that point where we actually realize what is it exactly that triggers us? What stimulates us? Exactly. What makes us angry? What makes us happy?
What's
if we
alive
understand those
in
things,
you?
we get to control and choose exactly what those stimulus are. But it takes a lifetime of experience to get to a point where we can actually choose what it is that we want to. What we want to. I guess.
How old are you? How many years old are you?
Only 36.
So in the Aztec calendar, there's a 260-day calendar and there's a 365-day calendar, and every 52 years the two line up. If you think of them like a big gear, and that's when supposedly you get wisdom.
Okay, if that's the case, then how close are we to the next one?
To the next 52 years? Well, I'm 65, so I'm on the downslope now.
So what you're saying is that we just have to survive 256 years, and then we can gain all the wisdom that we need.
Well, I think it's relative to like what we were talking about before, dealing with the trauma that's in your life. That's kind of what basically dealing with the trauma. It makes it so you want to get up in the morning because every day is like something new, something wonderful is going to happen. That's how I look at life. Before, I used to not look at it like I looked like everything was geared against me.
Well,
Now when I find out I'm wrong, I get happy because I learned something new.
I agree with you, and that is what wakes me up in the morning as well. The fact that there are people all over the world, from coast to coast, that are smarter than me, that have done more than me, better engineers than me, better scientists than me. The fact that those people are willing to even give the time of day and teach somebody at the basic engineering level that I'm at, that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what I do day in and day out. Every single day, it's the same story. I replicate, work on, develop, and help refine something that somebody smarter than me or more advanced than me has helped develop before me. And even if I come up with something completely original, which I do quite often, if I really dig into it, I haven't really found up to this point something which is completely 100% unique, except for just a small number of things outside of the scope of what other people before me have already come up with. And yeah, maybe a lot of them are buried. A lot of the things that I am an expert on, they have been buried. But that doesn't change the fact that they came before me and that I'm just the latest iteration of a long series of inventors who have discovered and rediscovered and rediscovered and rediscovered the same things again and again and again.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't, like they talk about civilization just developed in the last 8,000 years. I don't buy that. I think that there's been many civilizations before us.
100%.
And the thing is, because our Earth is so dynamic that the information is lost. I mean, 10,000 years ago, after the last ice age ended, the sea level went up probably 200-300 feet. And a lot of areas that were occupied before are now all underwater. And we know more about the surface of the moon than we do our own oceans. So,
oh yeah, there's some buried cities out there and
so
technology.
yeah, I'm pretty sure there's, that civilization probably goes back at least 1,000 years. That's the Aztec sunstone calendar. That's 104,000 year calendar. So,
yeah, the history, the stories of Lemuria and Atlantis and all of that, the golden ages, the Kali Yuga and the cycles, it quite most likely is definitely hundreds of thousands, if not even longer.
yeah, I just that's why I'm kind of skeptical when I hear about aliens building the pyramids and stuff like that. Actually, we know for sure that aliens didn't build the pyramids. You know what built the pyramids, right? Beer.
We have three major theories, all of
Beer. No, the archaeological record has shown it. They found the worker village, and they were paid a gallon of beer a day to work on the pyramid. They weren't slaves; they were workers. And they
I
paid them
agree
in
with
beer.
you, Boyd, that slaves didn't build the pyramids. That's an absolute certainty in my mind. I mean, it was a skilled trade assembly. The pyramids are way too precise from inside to out, every single stone laid. The complications and errors would have compiled if it was assembled by people who had no idea what they were doing. But even
They gave them the beer first because there's no way you'd build that sober.
Well,
you give them a gallon of beer. They give them this big thing of beer. They get them totally trashed, and they're like, "Dude, I got."
Well,
this idea.
no, they had to get them just tipsy. They couldn't get them trashed because then they'd fall asleep.
No, that's the work meeting. The work meeting, they're planning. It's obvious that alcohol was involved in planning of these things.
Now, there's this other guy that I ran into, and he's got this theory that they used water somehow.
Yes,
get all those
let's cover
stones,
that
right?
because it's important. I mean, that is actually the most valid and viable theory for how those things are built.
My theory is similar. Instead of water, they use beer.
There's actually I have read and it was a long time ago. It's really blurry, but I'd read that there was an economic reason for it. Basically, this was like their version of. Remember in the 30s during the Depression when they built all the the U.S. freeways? This was their version of that. It was. We got all these people who we got to give them jobs, got to give them gold. Okay, well, what do we have them do? Well,
build a pyramid.
Sure, why not?
For the king, he's going to die eventually.
Yeah.
Let's just look at the facts of the pyramid. The Giza Plateau has 3 major structures and several other smaller structures. Substructures, the largest of which is that Great Pyramid. We know that its precision is clearly the work of master architects. Its precision absolutely matches that of today's buildings and then some, and it contains a number of fundamental geometric codes which represent not only the diameter of Earth, the distance of Earth to the moon and to the sun, but even our precessional angle and our geomagnetic field. So there are a number of constants that are included within the Great Pyramids. And so this clearly was not the work of drunken slaves. And we know that it couldn't have been slavery. That being said, though, we have a definite mile marker of the Aswan granite found at the Great Pyramid in the Giza Plateau, or I should say on the Giza Plateau, which comes from 500 miles upstream of the Nile River, and that's a long freaking distance. 500 miles is a long way. We know they didn't roll the stones across the sand. We know they didn't simply carve them out and, run them on logs. But the simplest explanation still, Boyd, is that they floated them down the Nile River, which happened to run extremely close to where the Great Pyramid and the other 2 are constructed. That being said, it doesn't mean that the techniques displayed in the video of the floating stones from their original quarry site to where they were delivered is necessarily complete, because maybe the stones were delivered down with floating logs or some kind of floats through the Nile River onto that plateau. What happened to them after that point, we really don't know, but I still do think that it's the best theory presently available that they could have been floated up via the ram pump concept.
I think it's a combination of methods. It probably used levers, and it probably used like you're describing both. They had to get the stones from the quarry, obviously.
Right, and we know that the quarry is 500 miles away.
So it's
not quite. I mean, not literally exactly 500.
I don't know how else they could do it.
It's almost 500 miles. I mean,
that's a lot of beer.
A lot of beer. Well, you know what? The river is flowing. I mean, nobody has to physically work to float that thing down.
Right.
You just got to stick it in the stream and let it go. And somebody's got to collect it at the end, sure. And maybe they need beer too, obviously, as compensation, of course. I mean, I would want beer if I was being compensated. I'll pull the stone out for a beer or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how many stones I pull out.
Yeah.
Either way, we know where they came from and we know where they went. Obviously, they went into the pyramid structure because they were quarried from the.
You don't think they needed aliens to teleport them or levitate them or something to the?
Yeah, we don't need that kind of theory, really, because we know how they could have been built without any of that. And this.
So
is
my point though is the it seems kind of. It kind of demeans human intellect when they say that it was built by aliens, right?
I agree with you.
Like,
you're smart enough.
Means us those primitive people weren't capable of doing that.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I could, and I have a couple of thoughts on that too. And I think that this is the big problem with UFOs in general, the UFO community, right, is that they're unwilling to take a serious look at the psychological factors. And so when you get into alien abductions, one of the known factors in at least some of the cases, many of the cases, maybe all of the cases, is this sleep paralysis, right? And they've done studies on that. And so, you've got these psychological issues. You've also got issues with I don't know if you guys ever seen the Mothman Prophecies, the movie. The book, I read a little part of it, but the movie was amazing. So that movie basically was about mass hysteria. And it's an interesting movie because one of the things they're saying is mass hysteria is not exactly what we think it is, but the other part is that people freak each other out. And so those actual events that happened at Point Pleasant, people were seeing UFOs all over the place. They were seeing the Mothman. They had all sorts of weird stuff happening. Most of that was not real. It was the human imagination. And the problem that I see is the UFO community picks that stuff up and they don't delineate. Anybody who comes forward and says, I was abducted, I was probed. Oh, well, okay. And then that person ends up being taken at face value. And, to me, it seems like that devalues the whole thing. And it also, it devalues the phenomena, and it devalues us, right? I mean, because we're basically ignoring the psychology behind it. So, yeah, I mean, Michael, when you talk about, you're talking about like a larger scope of things, when you say aliens built the pyramids, what you're saying is, the point that you're alluding to is, okay, aliens built the pyramids because we're not able to, we're not good enough, right? And then there's this other aspect to it of, well, I don't understand how the pyramids could be built, so it has to be supernatural, right? And that goes to the UFO thing. Well, something strange happened and I can't explain it, so it has to be aliens, But that's one of the reasons that that community has such a hard time being taken seriously, because everything that's unexplained has to be something extraordinary,
Right. It's dogmatic,
Well,
unfortunately.
it's kind of like criticism, evaluation, judgment. All those things are a tragic expression of an unmet need.
Yeah.
So basically, it's and that's part of nonviolent communication, isn't really hearing criticism or judgment, but hearing what's the need.
Well,
So when somebody's like saying that, they're making a judgment and or evaluation about this experience they had, okay, part of the thing about the empathy is and stigma is overcoming that tendency to evaluate the person, not to hear what they're feeling and needing. Because if you hear what they're needing, then you can empathize. Because a lot of times they're needing the same thing you are.
Okay,
but
so
you're so busy trying to figure out what the hell they're saying.
Yes. No,
that you miss the forest for the trees, essentially.
Yeah, and you're talking about the psychological aspect of it.
I'm talking about the psychological. It's about being able to hear what people are feeling and needing. And they were feeling like that person was probably feeling terrified, feeling afraid.
Well,
right?
I think a big part of it, this is just me, but I think that UFOs are not, for many people, for most people, are yet another quest for the divine, right? I think it's as simple as that. And that doesn't, I'm not making a judgment about it,
Yeah,
but
I understand.
and I think one of the things that folks forget is UFO cults, as they call them, go back throughout the 20th century. That's one of the reasons that people don't take it seriously. In the 40s or 50s, there was a pretty famous guy who wanted to take all of his followers to Venus because that's where the UFOs were from. And then it was Mars, and we had Heaven's Gate, and and you've got all these mutually exclusive stories, right? But
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
mean, we should never forget Heaven's Gate and the Purple
yeah,
Pluto.
but it's like, well, what is it that draws all those together? It's this need I think we all have this need to feel like somebody knows what's going on. Maybe that's little gray men in a spaceship, but
Well, it's dogma. It comes down to we're accepting some dogma,
yeah.
which is not based on evidence.
I get what you're
So
saying.
it comes down to what I'm trying to suggest is compassion is the first thing, and then evidence.
Yeah, and so what you're saying is somebody's telling you a story about being abducted, rather than saying, is this likely to be true or not, which is most people's first reaction. What you're saying is, why does the person need to believe this? What is it? What question does it answer for them to believe that? And maybe I'm asking the same question in a different way. That's
Wow,
that.
Tim, you said that really well. I'm
Perfect.
really impressed. I'm really impressed at how you said that. That's exactly right. Yeah, what does it answer? Why are some people abducted, and why do they talk about it in the ways that they do? It is a
Yeah.
fundamental question, and it does help us to relate to ourselves and to something larger than ourselves, more importantly.
Well,
And there's certainly a trend there.
and in that sense, with what Michael is saying, this is just my thought, but this abduction, whether or not the abduction happened, is almost irrelevant. It's secondary. It's it's they need to believe that it happened. Why do they need to believe that? What is it that they're searching for that
And a lot
answers?
of times you'll find there's some kind of trauma that occurred associated with the abduction. I mean, abduction is a traumatic thing. I mean, I like when I was 4.5, I experienced abandonment, and it messed me up for like 60 years. And so I can imagine that somebody that experiences this abduction thing, that's like deep traumatic thing.
And Michael, it's important. I think it's important for all of us to realize that these traumas, that they're not all childhood traumas.
Oh no,
And
no,
I
they can occur all throughout your life.
yes, yeah. So my, if since we're sharing, this is a story that happened to me. I don't know. I might as well share it. But my first wife passed in 2018 of ovarian cancer, and she hid it, actually. She hid it from everyone, and so even learning about it was difficult. But basically, she had been in chemo for a year, and she was getting better, and her partner and her were, to the entire world, oh, she's doing great, and she caught a flu and went to the hospital for the flu. Well, so I ended up getting this call a couple of weeks later, and actually, that's not even what happened. What happened was I was texting her, and her text got all screwy, right? And I was just checking up on her because I was remarried. She had a new partner. I was just, how are you doing? How's the chemo going? Oh, everything's going great. And it just started random letters on the screen scrolling down. And I was like, what's going on there? And and then a minute later, I text her. I said, what's going on? You know, and she said, "Oh, sorry about that. That was the morphine kicking in." And I was like, "Wait a minute. Why are you on morphine? You're in the hospital for a cold." Well, it wasn't. It was a relapse, and it was that final stage. And so I went down. I stayed with her. Her whole family was there. All of us took turns holding her hand while she passed. And in terms of trauma, being there, I guess, in those final moments, in some ways, that was a release. That released a lot of pain, right? From the divorce, from all of those things. 10 years before, I worked through a lot of it. But then at the same time, for several months after that happened, I go to bed and I close my eyes, and I was right back there at that hospital bed. And and that bothered me. And it was just, I looked it up. They say, well, that happens. It's a mild form of PTSD, and it goes away over time, and it did. But and I'm not special. I'm sure that happens to lots and lots and lots of people. And it is interesting. I mean, these, especially with that, it's not just cancer, but one of the things that I found is the life extension community. I've done a lot of interviews there. Folks in the life extension community, a lot of them are there because they've lost someone, you know, parents, spouse, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, something along those lines.
Would you be afraid of death?
Probably. I'm not
How about,
I'm not special.
would all of you be afraid of death?
Yes and no. It's like I'm not personally. It's like I just believe and resonate that my soul is old and that like it's the soul part is immortal. So once you make peace with that, death isn't as scary. But then it's like that's your old like outside consciousness. There's the moment to moment where then it's like if you're in a deadly situation, it's like, oh my god, what am I doing? And you get that fear. And I guess it's a fear of not accomplishing what I want to do before I die, and that
So does it have anything to do with reward and punishment? In other words, do you believe when you die you're judged?
I'm not sure.
Or do you think it's more like the Tibetan belief of
my own
you got those karmic delusions like we have, and then if you figure out how to deal with them, then you get to go to nirvana, where it's emptiness, where there's no drama anymore.
Which is kind of what they were saying in Lucifer, right? Towards the end of it.
So my hypothesis is literally like we were talking about, if a ghost is a spirit got stuck in the garbage disposal, didn't make it over because it didn't deal with its karmic delusions. Basically, it's bullshit. People carry this bullshit with them between lives, and they get stuck.
Yeah. we've all got stuff, right? We've all got stuff.
Yeah. So, but and I did this research. I read this book by Leslie Kean, and she wrote this book about what happens after deaths, where she was a journalist and she actually had case studies that she was looking at, and they had like a lot of near-death experiences where, and one of my favorite was this one where an aged mother was going to die, and her daughter's in the hospital with her waiting for her, and she's like semi-comatose. They have to like pick her toe with a stick or something to see if she still responds. And she's like sitting there, and all of a sudden her mom sits straight up like this and goes, "Hey Joe, how's it going?" And Joe was her deceased father who died like 2 or 3 years before. And she like starts talking to the deceased dad, and then lays back down, and then she goes back to like she was. And then a couple days later,
that's amazing.
And so
there are stories. I heard one. I got this is one. This was the doctor wrote this. Heart surgeon, right? Does emergency surgery. He has one of his patients. The patient is scheduled. Something, I don't know. Something happens before they expected it. So the guy goes into this really long, difficult surgery. The patient, right, dies on the table, dead for like 5-10 minutes or something like that. I don't remember what. And so the heart surgeon, they've got him opened up. He's on all the machines and stuff, but there's this point where he's gone, right? And they're like, bring him back, you know. And fortunately, they're in the operating room, so they got all their tools, so they managed to bring it back. So anyhow, you fast forward like a day or so, you know, the guy starts to come out of his anesthesia. As he starts to come out of his anesthesia, and again, this is the story that I'm telling you. I read this from the doctor. The doctor wrote this, right?
Yeah, this one I was from the nurse.
Yeah. So in this story, the guy starts coming out of his anesthesia, and he starts mumbling, you know, and over time it becomes more coherent. And I was like, what's this guy saying? And he's saying a series of numbers over and over again, right? Just series of numbers, long series of numbers, you know. And they're like, okay, well, we don't know what's going on here. Give him some more time. You know, the guy kind of fades out, comes back, keeps saying this. Okay, well, so finally the doctor comes in, you know, because the guy won't say anything else, and the doctor looks at him, and the guy says, he keeps saying this series of numbers, so the doctor writes it down. And then the guy, he's a little more lucid, and he's like, you wrote that down, right? And the doctor's like, yeah. He's like, well, what's going on? He's like, I want to tell you that you know, your surgery didn't go well, but you came out of it. You're with us, you know. And the guy says, I know. He said I was there in the room the whole time, and he said I knew you wouldn't believe me. So he's like, I memorized the serial number on top of the light. And so the doctor gets up there with the ladder, and he looks at the top of the light, and it's the serial number, and there's no way that you could have seen that unless you were at the ceiling. So
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely. Yes, I've asked my friend Patrick to place a small note on top of his light fixture that he has never told me about. I have no idea what's written on it. I asked him to keep it underneath 7 characters, write them in all capital letters, and draw his own representation of a little picture above it. Just so, in the case that something happens, I know where I will go in order to look at this kind of possible effect.
There you go.
I don't know. Yeah.
But what I was going to tell you about the lady passed away, but the important thing about it was what it did to the daughter, who was in the family members, was that it gave them a closure, and because it was like when she was talking to the dad was basically telling her everything's okay, we're all fine here, and we're just waiting for you to give you lots of love, essentially.
Well,
and
that's
essentially
good.
what
That's
the moral of the story is death isn't something to fear. Death is where you get to be back with your loved ones that have passed on. And they're all there all the time. Right now they're there. Your ex-wife is right there in the room with you. You may not know it, but she's there. These spirits, these energies stay together over, and even the people that you don't like. That's the other thing about it. Even the people that told you to fuck off, they're in your circle forever.
Well, that's generational trauma, Boyd. I mean,
Because that's that part of the epigenetics too.
There's a paradigm change though, isn't there? Because you know, when you're a kid, you think about ghosts, and it's like Ghostbusters. I don't like ghosts. I'm afraid of ghosts. I don't want to think about it.
Right.
You get to a certain age, and you're like, I hope they're ghosts. I
Well,
hope
ghosts don't like Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters scares the hell out of them.
Yeah, I don't want to bust ghosts. I want to trap them into a
I don't want a proton
energy
beam.
production resources.
No, but
ghosts
I
are
mean,
power, right? If they're paranormal and they're producing electromagnetic functions, we should tap them for energy generation. So maybe I'm very, very screwed up in the mind.
Well, maybe that's
maybe
sucking up souls to power your craft.
power generation.
I heard Lucifer's a dude, so you might be on.
My soul-powered UFO.
The harder they fight, man, the harder they fight, the more power you get. I'm just saying.
Hey guys, I'm starting to fade. I hate to tell you.
Getting a little late.
It's like
fun, guys.
almost midnight. I can't imagine you guys must be like what, 2 a.m. or something.
Something like that, but I mean,
I'm on West Coast too.
Let's see what Charlie's up to. I mean, it's only one day before the next big APEC conference. Tomorrow we have a major conference. Tim, I can't believe you're still awake. I know you got to go. It's super late. So I know Charlie's been super, super busy. He's got the gravity flyer. He's got my silly little coil here. this thing is kind of dead in the water until the inventor of this system decides that he wants to come
Well,
out. Right now,
so
he's totally
Jeremiah,
reserved.
that's yours? Is that your coil? This hovering?
Yeah, that's my coil. That's that.
That
Okay,
But
one
so-
it's not my coil. I should
Right.
emphasize, Tim. It is. I built it, but I have it.
Yeah, I
and
know,
burned
but
it
I mean,
up, but it
that's
does
your.
not belong to me. The IP is not mine.
So was that over, and that was over a non-conductive surface, right? It's
Yeah,
not
that's over
inductive.
a
It's not.
plywood table painted black.
Do you have any explanation why it was hovering like that?
I do, but it's only theoretical at this point, and until he decides to come out with it, I don't own it, so I'm gonna stop pretty much with my crazy theory.
It sounds like it sounds like that's, to me, that sounds like an experimental replication. That sounds like a really big thing. He made a claim, he described how to build it, more or less, and you've got some results. Now, maybe you don't have the results that he says he has, but you've got some results. If it's hovering, that's something. That's a whole lot of something, right?
It's not even close to what he has, but yeah, it's something. I mean, it's one of 6 systems of this year, Tim.
Okay, well, so there you go. So I think, yeah, Jeremiah, if you want to demo that tomorrow, man. Demo that tomorrow.
I definitely
and you
can't
describe
demo that
where it
tomorrow
is.
because I burned the damn thing up.
Well, you could play the video though. Play the video and describe the video.
I definitely do not want to do that, and I can't describe it because I promised due to the IP that I will not describe exactly how it's operating, and that's been the major question. Like, people can see what it does,
Yeah.
but if I don't describe exactly what it's being run by or the geometry that's explicit in that system, it's not going to give anybody.
Well, no, I think what it would be nice. It would be nice for people at APEC to be able to see what you're showing us right now, right? And say, look, I built
not
this.
for now though, because it would be far better if they actually have something to work with. Right now, it's okay. I don't want to use curse words, but this is basically it's like a tease. Without the rest of the information, it's not that useful, and that's the truth. I found out the hard way that it's not that useful. Even I needed his help. I couldn't do it on my own. I needed his help. So that's something that I don't own, and I don't want to refocus people towards that until he's ready. So for the time being, we already have somebody in the audience that's right now ready to talk and let things out there. That's Daniel Foster, and we have the grav inductor. It's just about done. He's working on it. I'm working on it.
Well, there
and it's really much simpler than this. Plus, it's a lot less dangerous. This thing can generate fields that will really screw you up. I did something really stupid, and I touched that thing, got close to it while it was operating. That was something I should not have done. And I found out, again, the hard way after the fact that this thing is quite damaging. So we need to understand more about the system, more about what it does. It's not inherently dangerous as an absolute. It doesn't have to be dangerous. It's just the way that I was running it, with not a defined frequency, ramping through some of the functions that it has major problems with. That thing is dangerous at certain frequencies, and you have wave nodes that compound into that thing as they're traveling from the outside field nodes in the far field and actually flowing into that system. We have issues. So again, I would direct people towards Dan's grav inductor, which a new video which teaches everyone exactly how to build that thing step by step will be coming out very shortly. But I'm not going to show this because until I'm ready to tell everybody exactly how this is connected, how it works, and what that geometry is, and until he is ready to let that out to the world, I can't really assist with it. I'm sorry, but it's not mine.
No, Jeremiah, I think that's fine. I think that video itself says something really powerful. I think what you're saying is, like you were telling me the other day on the phone, you were describing what, some of the stuff that his coil does. Okay, so now you have validation of that, and you've tested it. This isn't his video, right? This is yours. Maybe it burned up, but you could go back and theoretically build another one of these or something like that.
Not without his help, I can't.
Well, it sounds like it's validation. That's what I'm trying to cheer you on, man. You keep shooting me down, Maurice.
In the tech, I believe in the technology, and I believe in the geometry that's being utilized here to produce results that are way above and beyond what we have presently looked into. But at the same time, I need the approval of the inventor himself, which is Gerald, and it's up to him. But like I said, Dan is giving it away. He's putting it out there. There is no restriction with Dan. It's there, and it's there right now. There is a significantly reduced danger. We could build it today, and Dan and I are both building it. Soon, a few other people will also be replicating that, and I'll have the whole tutorial video on what I'm doing. So if mine works, then that video is being pumped out exactly as is, showing precisely how I built it step by step. And if it turns out it needs a modification, I'll simply add that in after the fact, and then I'll release that video.
Well, and Dan is typing. He's in chat. He's typing slowly. He said he's been winding coils. His fingers are tired, but he said he'll credo that. So presumably he's open to doing demo. I'm saying bring him tomorrow.
If I can, I'll be winding the last coil of the 6 tonight. It's the final bifilar caduceus column coil. It's the last piece of the 6 pieces. We have 2 counterwound hemispheres. We have 2 counterwound pancake coils. Each pancake coil on its own isn't counterwound, but the 2 together, they are counterwound. And then we have 2 independently counterwound column coils, which we would just conventionally call solenoids, but they're technically caduceus coil style counterwound. And with those 3 things together, we have a system where we have DC flowing in the center. We have some setup magnetic fields where our norths are canceling between the 2 bifilar pancakes, and our souths are being projected outwards towards the surfaces. And then we have 2 north poles being projected from the outside of the bifilar column coils, and we can reverse the polarity on those as well. So we'll find out shortly or soon enough if that system can actually lift itself up, if it can do what it's reported to do. And again, it's a lot simpler. It's not as dangerous. It's nowhere near as dangerous.
Yeah,
the emissions are symmetrical.
Key.
Say again, Bernie?
The safety part is key 100%. Like the danger with those coils, like both Gerald, when he was on my show before, speaking of the harm that he experienced, Adam a couple weeks ago also saying that he was harmed and damaged by experimenting with some of the coils, the wrong frequencies, energies through it, that until we figure out what's safe to be testing with them, that we shouldn't be putting it out there for others to replicate, essentially, is what you're saying.
As Adam might say in his own words, I am fairly confident that my device has screwed up the last 20 years of my life. End quote. So I don't doubt it.
So you screwed up the last 20 years. So you're saying it would be a reverse time effect? Is that what you're talking about?
It caused him health reciprocations that were quite detrimental to, well, his progress forward. And he's been suffering with them for the last 20 years or more. I personally have exposed myself to a few things that I was stupid and should not have done, but they were mostly recent. I guess I'll let you know in 10 years how bad they were, or I won't, and maybe we'll remediate them. But for the time being, yes, I've done some dumb things, and I wasn't the first to do it. That's why we have these other people in the community who have already achieved quite a number of things. And they have unfortunately been exposed to fields which have damaged their bodies and caused them health detriments that continue to this day.
Yeah, Adam's in the chat right now saying it messed up his health. Charlie, do you got your chance to talk finally? So patient and awesome. Do you have anything? Want to share a couple things before we cut this off and go to APEC tomorrow?
Yeah, there's a lot we talked about, a lot to cover, but yeah, we start with the hover coil. So this is the Mike Powers version of it, and the geometry is quite complex, but it takes pieces to wind. But like Tim was saying, it was verified. So Gerald's kind of independent from Jeremiah, and they were able to reproduce the effects. So in science, that's a big breakthrough. That's what I was trying to do with the gravel flyer, by just verify it independently. So. We just need more people in the community that's maybe academic-wise. Gerald had said he's working on a kit, and hopefully could send me one to verify, and then could show in academia how it's working and get peer review of it. But for me, since it's already been verified, it's great breakthrough propulsion.
Yeah,
And
to me, it seems like you just want to verify it as much as you can, right? So, you build one, build two, send them to a friend. I don't know.
yeah,
Send them to
but
Mark.
yeah, it's like what they mentioned with the G2 experiment. They found an observation, and they even sent the whole equipment over to another lab to try to reproduce it. Once they can do that, then it's more.
Try different surfaces too. Try different surfaces, right? I mean, if nothing else, that eliminates this idea of there's metal in the table, or there's conductive paint, or God knows what. Try it over tile, try it over cement, try it over the kitchen floor.
For sure.
I think it's exciting. I think it's exciting. This is this is
100%.
probably one of the first things I've seen actually do anything since the lifter days. And this is most certainly not a lifter. So
right, this finally gets rid of the dispute of the ion wind from the lifter.
Yeah,
and
way
this
too
is
heavy.
Yeah, this Charlie. I mean, did you test? And have you gotten the ozone?
Yeah, I smelled an ozone from it, but I haven't noticed any lift yet.
You could try potting it, right? Maybe that would solve it. If you used a light potting, that might.
No,
work.
you can't. Actually, we've been theorizing that the wires actually need to vibrate in order to operate. So we're not sure yet, but I wouldn't recommend going straight to that step, because we do believe the wires may in fact need to be exposed and vibrate in order to produce this phenomenon.
Yeah, if you pass the high voltage pulse DC, that's how I got the ozone. And by passing AC through it from a variac, that's how I got the rotating magnetic fields that was proven by the spinning magnet. This is a ball magnet. And I colored half black and half white to see it was spinning. And yeah, I get a spinning magnetic field from that. So some combination of those two that gets like high voltage spinning magnetic field that creates this lift.
It
What do you
really
think
comes
is
down to
actually
phase
doing the
shift.
lift?
Go ahead.
Sorry, what do you think is actually producing the lift? I mean, is it something like an interaction with the aether, like the underlying substrate of the universe?
I love that you said that, and because of that, I will answer yes. It's an interaction with the aether.
Well, do you think there was something called xenic surface waves? Do you think it could be a xenic surface wave? Basically, some kind of and I do know it's been a long time, but it was an induced. It's like an induced wave in matter, and supposedly it's kind of. You'd have to look it up. I'll look it up.
No, you can get wave functions on the surface, but consider that every single link between each straight length of wire where there's a cross point is an antenna. And that antenna has an independent resonant frequency, and you have a set of harmonics that all interfere. But you have also electric field pinch points between cross conductors where the capacitance that would normally be present symmetrically in, say, a solenoid coil is distributed throughout the system and only takes place directly between the cross points. So there you have high capacitance, and the most of it is inductance. You only have incredible voltage gains at that capacitance cross point, so you end up with extraordinarily high voltages, way beyond the back EMF that you can receive at the ends of the wire. Let's say I get 1200 volts back EMF because that's the limits of my transistor. Well, we could easily be pushing 3000, 4000 or more volts at the cross points, and that's one of the reasons why we get so much ozone production in plasma. And this can happen at as little as 4 volts input. But the grav inductor takes care of all of these phenomena and does it without having to pinch the fields, which is why I would like to redirect people towards working on that, because again, Dan's giving it away. Dan's not in the shadows, and he's not holding off for now, and there are reasons why that system is a lot safer. So we should really focus on trying to do that for now.
Yeah, and Gerald said he would go on APEC tomorrow, so we'll find out. But he's been saying that since last APEC as well.
Yeah, he's not. Well, as far as Tim and I have talked about this too. He's not going to go on tomorrow, as far as I've heard. So.
Yeah. Hopefully he shows up. We will see. On that note, should we wrap things up and I'll go to sleep or finish everything that we need to do to be ready for APEC tomorrow? And Charlie, I'm so sorry. We need to just do a one-on-one stream with just me and you and let
Yeah.
you show everything.
Show you around.
Look at that.
Sneak
You-
preview. Yeah, a bunch of the coils,
Yeah.
gravel flyers, and then Mark Sokol's gyro propulsion device based on Mike Gamble's design improved. So I think, yeah, Tom Vaughn was just emailing me about that. He's interested in, Mike Gamble was interested in the hover coil as well, so it's all kind of connected.
Nice.
We'll have to
That
go over
is
that in more
awesome.
detail later. Yeah, thanks.
Bernie, am I able to show you some pictures I found on my computer about the counter-rotating impeller blades, just so you kind of
Yeah, if you can
see the
hit present quickly and share screen, I can put it up quick before we cut it off. And Tim, while you're still here, Jim, I'm still going to show a bit of the star in the jar tomorrow and explain. Maybe if you want to come on with me for the segment that I'm presenting and correct me for anything that I might say wrong or whatever you want to release info-wise on it.
I would just simply tell them that we are getting some what appears to be additional energy output, but we aren't achieving the helium-3 reaction. That was the goal of that system in that video clip.
Yeah, that we suspect it's the steps towards it.
Bernie, I'll be right back. I got to shut down my Chrome, and then I'll be right back.
Yeah, gentlemen, I just came back on to say goodnight. I have to start wrapping things up. So
yeah.
Have a wonderful
Ross,
evening.
maybe do tomorrow at the end of APEC in the open sessions, show it, because we should wrap things up tonight here.
Yeah, there we go.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join you guys. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Greatly appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Do
We'll
everyone
see
a favor.
you
Pop your little StreamYard link in the chat. I'll stick around for, well, a bit and answer some questions if people have them in the private chat. But or I should say in the after party show. Just go ahead and let them know what the link is. I'll stick around for a bit, and within 10 minutes, if nobody really shows up, then probably dash off.
Will do. Sounds
Show you real
good.
quick.
Yeah. If you got it ready, absolutely, Ross.
All right. You see? You see it?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So this is Mike Marsden. Okay, you see him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's his atmospheric engine. So these on the four sides, those are actually pistons. I didn't even get a chance to finish my explanation of the machine itself. So the counter-rotating impeller blades that I was saying, they fit down into this tube right here, this top one. You see? You understand?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Following.
Okay, and then here are the actual 7 counter-rotating impeller blades that fit down into that cylinder, that hole. So you see the moon shapes. They're basically each one of these impellers spins in opposite directions. So as the air,
my gosh.
Yeah, as the air is hitting these moon shapes, we call them, they do a U-turn. So they come in, remember I was saying they come in about almost 1,100 miles per hour. So they're directed at this first stationary blade, this first one. And then it hits these counter-rotating impeller blades. And each time they hit these moon U-turns, they have to stop and then turn around and go in the opposite direction, which slows down the physical speed of the air. And each time it's doing this, it's consecutively being slowed down one by one. as it's going through these counter-rotating impeller blades. And it's hard to give you the idea because in this picture, they're obviously not moving. They're just stationary. So you have to think about these 7 different blades. These impellers are spinning at tremendous speed. Initially, this first one is going 1,100 miles per, or almost 1,100 miles per hour, to match the speed of the air that's coming in, the atmospheric air. And by the time it comes out, the last impeller blade, it's so slow that its average speed is so slow that it's no longer a gas form, it's a liquid form at that point. So that's how it becomes a liquid. That's why it's a liquid. It's because of these, counter-rotating impeller blades.
Okay, that's fascinating potential.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying now.
It's a really expensive machine, but what it really looks like to me is a turbomolecular pump. And hey, Bernie, maybe you can do a Google search for a turbomolecular pump and pull one up to show people the comparison, because it really is a very similar device. And they are designed to create one of the highest vacuums known to man. It's just short of what we would get in the vast vacuum of outer space.
What type of pump again?
Turbomolecular.
Oh, turbomolecular.
Yeah, he actually got the idea from Werner von Braun. The counter-rotating impeller blades. He actually got it from Werner von Braun, because when he made the V2 back in Germany in the 30s, he had the same thing. He basically had a steam pump. It's the same concept. So it's a steam producer. It's sodium permanganate in a tank, and it's basically hydrogen peroxide, and it creates what's called high pressure dry steam. So it's not actual water steam, it's high pressure dry steam, and that's what spun the impeller that ran the fuel pump and the oxygen pump for the V2. So in the V2, the impellers are spinning in just one direction. So,
hey, Bernie, you'll have to find an image of a turbomolecular, and yeah, they don't do the counter rotation thing like Ross is describing here with that pump. They just create that same incredible pressure differential by smashing the air around, and they basically grab hold of and smash out any other higher velocity molecules or higher density molecules, leaving almost nothing behind. But you have to find an image of the inside turbine.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody doing counter-rotating impeller blades, because think about it. I mean, in most jet engines and things share a single shaft. So it's impossible to have counter-rotating impeller blades most of the time, physically, because everything's sharing the same shaft. So they all have to spin at the same direction. What I was showing you with those counter-rotating impeller blades, there's no central shaft. There's ball bearings around the periphery. So each one of those impeller blades, those round discs, they're spinning around in a circle, and the ball bearings are on the outside of them. That's how they're spinning around. So each one can counter-rotate and not affect any shaft that's going down the center. There's no shaft down the center. They have their own individual ball bearings on the outer perimeter of the blades themselves. So that's a really crucial key engineering wise that he produced when he had to come up with a way to how can you make impeller blades spin in opposite directions, because engineers have never done such a thing. So he put ball bearings actually in the outer rim of the impeller blades. So that's how they're able to individually spin in opposite directions, because their ball bearings are on the outside. So that's another very unique thing about this machine. Yeah, it's basically the same kind of deal. That machine, those are compressors. You're compressing air. The whole idea behind the Mike Marsden's Mach 1.1 is you don't want to compress air. You want the air to naturally flow to a lower pressure region, from a higher pressure region to a lower pressure region. And the extreme version of a low pressure region is a zero vacuum. You can't get any lower than that. That's the absence of air. There's no air anymore. It's just a complete empty vacuum, the perfect place that air would love to flow into. So that's what he's doing. He's introducing a 0 psi vacuum that the air is essentially perpetually trying to reach. So that's where the it looks like it's a suction, but it's not really a suction. It's just a 0 pressure region, and the Earth's atmospheric pressure is literally forcing itself in. Like I was saying with my mouth, when I'm breathing, I'm opening my mouth and the atmosphere is just shoving air into my lungs. I'm not actually sucking air in. All you're doing is opening your mouth, and your diaphragm opens up, and the Earth's atmosphere is pushing the air forcibly into your mouth and down into your lungs.
Don't forget that the inside of your lungs are at the same pressure differential as the outside of your lungs. So 15 psi on the outside, you still got 15 psi on the inside. The differential between the two is actually pretty negligible, and that's only based on how much, well, you suck, pun not intended, but you know what I mean. Like if you pull in and you take a whole breath of air, you pull in and you close your mouth, you're going to have a negative pressure differential, and yeah, sure, air will flow in, but ultimately you have the same pressure inside your body that you have on the outside of your body. But I get your analogy. Yeah, if you have a pressure differential where you've smashed all the molecules out, you have no air inside that system. It's just this void because all these little turbine blades have grabbed onto every single molecule, every single atom. They've taken them out of the system. Well, you're going to have this void, and of course you're going to have this pressure differential, but it's all going to be negative pressure going into that system, into the core of that turbine. It's not going to be pushed through. It's not forced through. It's not a push. It's purely being pulled through the entire stage all the way. And that means it's always at less pressure inside the pump than it is everywhere else outside the pump. That means thermokinetic energy is transferred to the pump, creates heating and issues which you would have to deal with, but that's also extra energy that you can add to your system as well.
And so I basically, the crazy thing is I literally only explained half of the machine to you all. I only got to the point where the machine takes atmospheric pressure, atmospheric air, and I guess you could say condenses it. It doesn't compress it. It just condenses it down into a liquid form. So it goes from a gaseous form into a smaller form, a tighter packed form, liquid. The most tight packed you can, well, except for solid. Solid is even tighter than liquid, but it just naturally does that. It's going into this machine, and it's going through these counter rotating impeller blades. It's coming in at almost 1100 miles per hour, which is the gaseous form of air. And it's doing these U-turns 7 times, hitting these blades, physically hitting them, turning around, going the opposite way, hitting another blade, slowing down, turning around, and then hitting another blade, physically turning around, and then having to go the opposite direction, physically turning around 7 times. It's doing this. So it's coming in really fast, and then it slows down. So it's coming in really fast and slows down 7 times. That's what's happening. The machine is going from gas to liquid. So, but then he also has a second stage where he takes that liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen, and then he re-expands it back into That's
Do you
what
have any
core-
videos of this, Ross, or can you get some
He doesn't-
videos of it?
I don't even know if he really wanted me to be talking about this, to be honest. But at this point, I'm getting tired of this guy he's not published anything. He's not patenting anything. And that's why me and Brian have gotten to the point where we're just taking it ourselves. You know what I mean? That's why we even endeavored on this whole Macwan 1 thing, this whole, my machine that I showed on APEC and Brian's machine. He calls it a trammel engine. That the whole reason why we're doing this is because Mike Marsden, I don't know if he's scared of maybe scared of the government. I don't know what is going on, or maybe he just thinks.
Sorry, Ross. I just got to quickly end the stream because we got a bunch of people jumping in here to talk afterwards. So you can, by all means, continue. I'm just going to play the 15-second outro, let everybody in, and then we can continue on the conversation.
Well, before you end it, we do have Adam.
Oh, okay. Adam, do you have anything to add in? Sweet ambitions.
I mean, he did get harmed from his machine, so maybe we should hear his input first before we end it.
Any last words, good Adam, on what not to do to harm yourself?
The damage threshold of time-sensitive devices, like the Curious device, for example. What did it do to you? How did it hurt you? And same thing with the
my internet is
with the Greenyer coils, with the bagel coils. Let's at least get that stuff out of the way so we can talk about the kind of dangers involved in time differential systems. Can you hear us, Adam?
Internet cut out. Everyone can just speak slow.